Chapter 575, The Heiress of the Chuns. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Shenji wrapped his withered hands carefully around the skin of the flood dragon. He nodded at the other two branch heads present, Chen Xichen and Chen Dan-kun. The faces of both men showed much joy. They were unable to conceal their inward excitement. The fourth volume of the Four-Nine Mysteries was about to return to the Chuns. The family would surely undergo many momentous changes. Shenji's face was slightly embarrassed. He had, after all, given his promise. The Chuns would never lay their hands on the treasure within the jade box, no matter what it was. Who would have guessed that the fourth volume of the Four-Nine Mysteries would be in the box? Had the Chuns seized this volume, they would have given the world something to talk about. They would have been mocked by all the monks in the world. What should he do? Shenji cast an imploring look at Half-Central Yulai. After all, Half-Central Yulai was Zhang Yuochen's future mother-in-law. It was better for her to come forward to communicate. Half-Central Yulai certainly knew how important the Four-Nine Mysteries was for the Chuns. Had she not come forward, they would have resorted to other means to get a hold of it. They had to have it at any cost. Liulai walked over to Zhang Yuochen and said, "Yuochen, you ought to realize that the fourth volume of this manual is of great significance to the Chuns." "Very well, state your condition." "The Chuns will do everything in their power to fulfill it." Zhang Yuochen's eyes stared at Bukion Fan standing opposite him. After Liulai made her request, Zhang Yuochen could not ignore her. He stopped staring at her and looked thoughtful. He asked, "Are you sure they will agree to any condition?" All three branch heads responded almost at the same time. "Of course." Zhang Yuochen fixed his eyes at Huang Yanjun. "Very well, I do have one condition. Well, I hope that senior sister apprentice Yanxun can become an heiress of the Chuns. I believe everyone will agree to this condition, won't they?" "That's impossible. How can a Chen inheritor be a woman with a different surname?" White-robed elder Chen Xichen instantly changed his expression and shook his head. He thought that Zhang Yuochen's condition was too difficult. The green-robed elder Chen Dan-kun was more gentle. He was more indirect as he said slowly, "Appointing an heiress of the Chuns is a grave matter. You need to consider many factors. A final decision can only be made after careful negotiations between the branch head and the elders' hall. There are too few of us to make this big decision." Even Huang Yanxun kept shaking her head at Zhang Yuochen. She whispered, "The Chuns won't let a woman be a Chen heir. No woman with a different surname can possibly hold such a position. And besides, there's no way I could be one with my present abilities." Of course, Zhang Yuochen had reasons for his condition. Huang Yanxun's Xuanwu holy source had already been exposed. Many people would be secretly coveting it. Making her a Chen heiress was the only way she could receive maximum protection. At the same time, she could also receive additional practice resources. Zhang Yuochen smiled and said, "There is a precedent of someone with a different surname becoming the leader of the Chuns. I also recall a woman being their leader once. If they could do that, why can't you?" Zhang Yuochen looked into the depths of the Saint Prince's mansion. He roused his chi and shouted into the air, "This condition isn't too much, is it?" He transmitted his voice over the entirety of the Saint Prince's mansion. Everyone thought that Zhang Yuochen had gone mad. He had even thought of making a woman from outside the family a Chen heiress. How could that be possible? However, after an interval of 3 breaths, a voice rang out from the Saint Prince's mansion. "An heiress for the fourth scroll of the Four-Nine Mysteries. That's not asking too much. I grant you this request." The voice was being transmitted across a great distance. Everyone present felt an enormous sense of pressure, as if the whole world was shaking. It was the present Chen leader, the prince of the eastern region. Everyone in the family knelt, pressing their palms and faces to the ground. They looked like they were worshipping the gods. Even half-saints did the same. After the ritual, they got to their feet again. Apparently, Zhang Yuochen's condition was not excessive. After all, he had only helped Huang Yanxun win the identity of heiress. She was still not its final leader. Each generation trained many heirs, but only one would ultimately become the future leader of the Chuns. Even if Huang Yanxun were an heir, it would be almost impossible for her to become its ultimate leader. But this new identity made her status completely different among the Chuns. Even Huang Yanxun felt like it was a dream come true. She had never thought she could one day become a Chen heiress. Had not the leader made the promise, she would never have believed it. The happiest people were naturally the Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince and half-Cent Liu Lai. Yanjin, shouldn't you kneel and thank the leader? The Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince urged her. Huang Yanjin gradually calmed down. She took a deep breath, knelt on one knee, and bowed in the direction of the Saint Prince's mansion. Thank you for the honor, leader. Huang Yanjin knew very well that Zhang Yuochen was the one who had helped her gain this honor. The person she should be most grateful to was him. When she stood up, her eyes gazed at Zhang Yuochen with complex emotions. She did not express her thanks. If she were to express her thanks, her relationship with Zhang Yuochen would appear too distant. Sometimes, two people only needed a look to communicate. A few intelligent people had finally realized it was Zhang Yuochen's ploy to take back the jade box. He had also deliberately opened the box. He had been digging a hole from the start, waiting for the Jins to jump into it. Zhang Yuochen's purpose was to win his fiancée the status of an heiress. The Jins must compromise for the sake of the fourth volume of the 49 Mysteries. Clap, clap. Buqian clapped his hands and said sarcastically, "How smart, Zhang Yuochen. You are very clever to use such ingenious tricks. Even the half-saints here are all inferior to you. No wonder you are the head of the young 6 great kings of the eastern region." He continued, "Your wedding gifts are indeed remarkable treasures. But I haven't lost yet. I have a special gift that I haven't brought out." All those present showed much disdain. Could any wedding gift match the Xiuanwu Holy Sauce and the 49 Mysteries? Buqian is really looking for death. He has offended the Jins and Sword Saint Xuanji. Just you wait. Saint Bugentry will soon be in big trouble. While everyone was mocking Buqian, Zhang Yuochen started looking quite solemn. He stared at Buqian and said, "You have a wedding gift." "What gift?" Buqian's right index finger gently caressed his chin. A bizarre expression crept onto his face. He smiled. "I think everyone can tell that you love Miss Yanjin very much. Unfortunately, I can't match your love. Before revealing my wedding gift, I have to ask you a question. If your mother and Miss Yanjin were to fall into the water at the same time, who would you save first?" Zhang Yuochen had a very bad premonition. His eyes became extremely cold. "What are you talking about?" Buqian still smiled. "I was just joking with you. Surely, you don't need to be so nervous." Swoosh! Zhang Yuochen immediately moved forward, and his figure streaked ahead. In a moment, he had dashed to where Buqian was. He aimed a stab right between his eyes with lightning speed. Buqian never thought Zhang Yuochen could move so horrifically fast. He immediately stopped smiling and took a step backward. His gloved right hand struck the tip of the ancient abyss sword. Zhang Yuochen's hand rotated rapidly. The force of the sword underwent a minuscule change and passed through the fingers of Buqian. Tch. The ancient abyss sword stabbed Buqian between the eyes and passed through his skull. Buqian was killed on the spot. Everyone was flabbergasted by this scene. Zhang Yuochen killed Buqian. No matter how annoying he was, Buqian was still a disciple of the Saint Bugentry. The gentry would not rest at this affront. The next moment, even more amazing things happened before everyone. About 30 meters in front of Zhang Yuochen, the air became slightly distorted. A totally unhurt Buqian materialized. The figure of the man who was killed by Zhang Yuochen's sword gradually became indistinct. It finally vanished. How did this happen? Did my eyes fail me? Wasn't Buqian killed? How did another Buqian appear? Zhang Yuochen was not surprised at all. His eyes were tightly glued onto Buqian. "I guessed right, after all. You're indeed a demonic shadow. Why don't you show yourself?" Had Buqian turned into someone else's shadow? When Zhang Yuochen said demonic shadow, many people immediately responded. How unusual this Buqian was. They surrounded him. "Ha, ha, Zhang Yuochen, you have finally seen through my disguise. You have taken much longer than I expected." Buqian smiled. Buqian had taken on his former appearance. But the voice from his lips was totally different. It was obviously someone else's voice. Suddenly, he stared daggers at Zhang Yuochen and said coldly, "Begin." Rumble. 1,200 brute elephants, each carrying a carriage full of spiritual crystals, was rushing towards East Region Saint Mansions. The elephants trumpeted and the shafts of the carriages kept turning. Gravel and sand flew everywhere. Smoke billowed. Everyone knew that brute elephants were war behemoths. But, originally, they were savage beasts used for delivering wedding gifts. As a result, people naturally forgot their aggressiveness. At this moment, they became infuriated and burst forward with frightful rage.